Have you ever been told something your whole life, only to find out it was completely wrong? Well, we're about to dive into a time in history when that happened to, well, pretty much everyone. We're talking about the scientific revolution, a time when humanity learned to see the world, the stars, and even ourselves in a totally new light.
So, just to get in the right headspace, think about this for a second. What if the solid ground you're on right now isn't solid and still at all? What if you're actually on a giant rock, spinning like a top while zooming through empty space? I know, it sounds a little crazy, but that one mind-bending idea is exactly what kicked this whole thing off.
All right, so our story begins where you might expect, by looking up at the night sky. For thousands of years, everybody just knew that Earth was the center of everything, and all the shiny stuff in the sky revolved around us. But a few people started to notice that the planets were doing this weird little dance that didn't quite match the official story. They were onto something big. So on the left, you've got the old view, the one that was accepted for centuries. Earth is the star of the show, totally still, and everything else circles around us. But the new view? Whoa. It suggested that the sun is actually the center, and we're just another planet making laps around it. I mean, you have to understand, this wasn't just a small correction. It knocked humanity right off its pedestal.
The guy who first put this wild idea out there was named Nicholas Copernicus. And this wasn't just some lucky guess. He spent 25 years, that's a quarter of a century, just watching the sky, tracking how everything moved. And the math, he realized, only worked if we were the ones moving around the sun. As you can probably guess, most people thought he was absolutely nuts.
Of course, an idea this big needs some serious backup. And it didn't happen overnight. It was kind of like a scientific relay race. First, you have Copernicus in the 1500s passing the baton with his big idea. Then, in the early 1600s, a guy named Kepler does all the super hard math to show it actually works. And finally, in 1610, Galileo Galilei grabs the baton and sprints to the finish line with a brand new invention.
And this is where things get really cool. Galileo points his telescope at Jupiter, and what does he see? 4 little dots of light circling Jupiter. This was a total bombshell. It was the first time anyone had seen actual visual proof that not everything in the universe orbited the Earth. It was like finding a miniature solar system that completely broke the old rules.
But, and this is a big but, when you challenge an idea that's been around for over 1,000 years, you're going to make some powerful people angry. The Catholic Church declared that the sun-centered idea was heresy, basically a crime against God's truth. This wasn't just a friendly scientific debate anymore. It was now a fight against the establishment itself.
And for Galileo, the price for being right was steep. For daring to say that the Earth moves, he was placed under house arrest, and he stayed there for the rest of his life. It was a clear, scary message. Don't question what you're told.
So, people now knew that the planets moved this way, but nobody knew why. What invisible string was holding it all together? The answer came from one man, Isaac Newton. He realized that the same force that makes an apple fall from a tree is the exact same force that keeps the moon circling the Earth. He called it gravity. One single rule to explain the whole universe. Amazing!
Okay, so changing the map of the cosmos was obviously a huge deal. But what's maybe even more important was how they figured it all out. This wasn't just about discovering new facts, it was about inventing a whole new way to find the truth in the first place.
At the heart of this was a new idea called inductive reasoning. The best way to think about it is like being a detective. You don't just decide who the bad guy is and then look for clues that fit. No, you go to the crime scene, you gather all the evidence, the fingerprints, the weird footprints, all the little details, and you let those clues lead you to the right answer.
One of the champions of this new way of thinking was Francis Bacon. He basically said, hey, for centuries we've been trying to understand the world by just reading what some old guys wrote in books. That's silly. Let's go out and actually look at the world. He believed real knowledge comes from observing things for yourself.
And then you've got René Descartes, who came at it from a different angle. He was all about the power of pure logic. His famous move was to doubt absolutely everything, until he found one thing he couldn't possibly doubt, the fact that he was thinking. And if he was thinking, he must exist. From that one solid starting point, I think therefore I am, he believed we could build all knowledge.
So what do you get when you combine Bacon's go look at stuff idea with Descartes' use your brain idea? You get the scientific method. It's one of the most powerful tools we've ever created. You ask a question, you look for clues, you make an educated guess, that's your hypothesis, and then you test it to see if you're right. It's basically a recipe for discovery.
But all this new thinking needed new eyes, right? And this is the last piece of the puzzle. This era also gave us a boom in new technology. Amazing new tools that let scientists see things that no human had ever seen before.
First, of course, was the telescope. It basically gave us superpowers for our eyes. All of a sudden, the moon wasn't some smooth, perfect little ball in the sky. Nope, it was a whole other world, covered in mountains and craters. It unlocked the gigantic scale of the universe.
And while the telescope was looking out into the infinitely large, the microscope looked inward to the infinitely small. Can you imagine? It showed us that a single drop of water was its own universe, full of tiny living things. We could finally see the hidden building blocks of life.
So really, what happened was scientists suddenly had this brand new toolkit. The telescope to see far, the microscope to see close, the thermometer to measure how hot or cold something was, and the barometer to figure out weather. Each new tool unlocked a whole new world to explore.
You see, the scientific revolution wasn't just a chapter in a history book. It was the birth of the modern way of thinking. That whole idea of being curious, of observing, of testing things out, that's what still drives all our progress today. Which leads to one last question. With the tools we have now, things that would have blown Galileo's mind, what discoveries are we about to make next?